All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking chapter 14 of Stephen Crooks's The Living Signature of God. And this one, it completely redefines how we handle our own personal failures. We are basically tearing down this whole fiction of perfection and replacing it with a framework of grace and, well, real growth. So if you've ever felt totally stuck in a loop of self-sabotage, yeah, you're definitely going to want to stick around for this.
So, I want you to think about that sinking feeling you get right when you slide back into a bad habit. You know the one. Maybe you picked a fight you didn't need to, mindlessly scrolled your phone for literally hours, or just let a super negative thought take the wheel. What happens in your brain that exact second? Usually it's just this massive wave of guilt. But today, we're going to see why that specific moment of relapse is actually a vital data point for your growth. It's not a defeat at all. Section 1, the old voice trap. Unmasking the inner accuser. Okay, so the second we stumble, this thing the author calls the old voice wakes right up. It's this inner accuser that immediately starts yelling, "See, you failed again, back to square one." And it uses this really sneaky tactic called regret friction. Now, we usually think of regret as our moral compass, right? Like, hey, if I feel bad, it means I'm holding myself accountable. But actually, this inner indictment just devours your energy. It literally anchors you in the past and locks you into this exhausting cycle of self-condemnation that completely stops you from moving forward. And this old voice has a whole bag of tricks to keep you stuck. Aside from generating that exhausting regret friction and cracking open what we'll call small doors to bad patterns, it triggers frantic overcompensation. You know what I mean? Have you ever messed up and then suddenly you feel this crazy urge to deep clean your entire house or be absolutely flawless at work just to prove your worthiness? Yeah, that's not real growth. That's actually just a flight response born out of the fear of repeating your mistake. It's using perfectionism as a shield.
Moving on to Section 2, Bert's Relapse Experiment, a case study in diminished satisfaction. To really wrap our heads around this, let's look at a fictional case study from the text about a guy named Bert. Now, Bert had been crushing it, steady progress, healthy habits for months. But then he has a highly stressful Tuesday at work. He gets home, that old voice starts whispering, and boom, he relapses. 20 solid minutes of eating cookies and just zoning out on social media. But here's the tryst. The next morning, instead of spiraling into a panic and overcompensating, Bert realizes something super surprising. The cookie actually didn't taste that good. And the scrolling? It just felt incredibly empty and boring. This is the crucial takeaway here. Bert's relapse was absolutely not a defeat. It was an experiment. And that experiment proved his old patterns had completely lost their magic. The intensity of the satisfaction had totally diminished. He'd basically been walking his new path long enough to know it tasted better. The relapse just confirmed that the old way simply didn't work for him anymore. As the text points out, true growth isn't about never stumbling. It's the wisdom of getting up with God completely free from self-condemnation.
All right, Section 3, the neuroscience of a relapse, rewiring the brain for grace.
What's amazing is the book doesn't just treat this as some abstract spiritual concept. It actually dives into the hard science. When we look at these two mindsets, there's a literal mechanical difference happening in your brain. If you condemn yourself, you just reinforce those negative emotional loops. But if you redefine a relapse as a moment of valuable insight, you actively decouple the guilt circuits in your brain from those old habits. You're shifting away from a fixed mindset, one that's fueled by guilt and this impossible demand for perfection, and moving into a growth mindset, one fueled by the prefrontal cortex, grace, and accepting that progress is, well, imperfect. It is such a fascinating biological reality by simply noticing how unfulfilling the old behavior was. Just like Bert noticing that cookie was kind of gross, you are literally weakening the neural pathways sustaining that habit. You starve the pattern of its emotional reward, and when you do that, it stimulates your prefrontal cortex to adopt a grace-based growth mindset rather than defaulting to rigid perfectionism.
Which brings us to Section 4, Tools for Inner Engineers, Practical Steps to Rebuild Your Mind.
So, knowing the neuroscience is awesome, but how do we actually apply this? The source material calls us inner engineers, working on the construction site of our own minds. And here is your blueprint. The text lays out 4 really powerful steps. First up, the less intense check. That means actually pausing during a relapse to ask yourself, is this even satisfying? Second, closing small doors. Third, doing a regret detox. And fourth, celebrating your intervals. Let's zoom in on step 2 for a second.
You've got to pay special attention to identifying these small doors in your daily life. These are the sneaky ones. It's things like deciding to fold the laundry just to procrastinate on a big work project, or maybe seeking out a slightly negative conversation, or grabbing a second cup of coffee you definitely don't need. The old voice uses these seemingly innocent, tiny habits to quietly drag you right back to the core of your destructive patterns. Proactively shutting these small doors down, that is the absolute secret to preventing a major relapse.
Listen, if you only take one thing away from this explainer today, let it be this. Growth is not about never making a mistake again. Perfection is total fiction. True progress is simply about increasing the interval between your stumbling moments. Every single minute, every hour you don't choose that old pattern, that is a massive victory for the inner engineer.
And finally, Section 5, the foundation of grace, biblical backing for profound security.
To really get the full picture here, the book anchors this whole psychological and neurological framework deeply in Scripture, giving your spirit complete freedom. This verse from Romans, it's presented as the absolute ultimate antidote to the old voice. When that inner accuser tries to drag you down into regret friction after you mess up, this is your response. It assures you that you are entirely free from the suffocating chains of self-condemnation, even when you stumble. There is zero condemnation. And then this verse beautifully backs up the whole growth mindset concept we were just talking about. It shows that in this framework, God's love assumes a continuous process of growth, not instant, flawless perfection. Relapsing isn't the end of the road, guys. It's literally just a step in a much larger, ongoing process of maturing, a process that is being actively guided and completed.
This statement right here, this is your ultimate regret detox. When the old voice starts screaming at you after a mistake, this is the exact affirmation you use to shut down those thoughts of self-reproach. I am an imperfect human, loved by God, and I am growing. It grounds you right back in the truth of profound security. You are allowed to be exactly as you are, imperfect, completely loved, and actively on a journey.
So, I want to leave you with a bit of a challenge. The next time you face a relapse, and you will, because we all do, don't panic. Please don't overcompensate. Treat it like an experiment. I challenge you to use that exact moment as a vital piece of data to prove to yourself that those old habits have finally